On the everyday carry camera side of Micro Four Thirds, there hasn't really been anything new, small or exciting for the last few years. We don't even know what a new camera would look like or what features it would realistically have.
Sell me this pen.
So in today's video, I'm compiling all of your different answers from comments, votes on community polls, and my own experience with Micro Four Thirds to kind of decide what would make the next best small camera for Micro Four Thirds a clear winner. And us being us, we're a little bit greedy when it comes to these features.
We'll take the lot. Whoa.
I wanted to kick things off with actually a problem with Micro Four Thirds, and this is a feature that I really think needs to be addressed in most upcoming cameras, and that is actually build quality.
Put it in H!
And I know what you might be thinking, a lot of older Micro Four Thirds cameras have been touted with having excellent build quality, but actually I have two horrible experiences where build quality really let me down with Micro Four Thirds cameras. This EN10 Mark II, I've just been trying to troubleshoot it online. It seems that the ribbon cable between the monitor and the camera have somehow become disconnected. So I'm not going to be able to show you the back of the camera. I've tried absolutely everything. The other occasion was much more recently, and it was actually with my Lumix GM1 that I still have right now. And I bought this secondhand in Japan, and it was working absolutely fine, even when I got back to Europe from Japan. And then on one day going out in Italy with the camera, I suddenly noticed an issue with my shutter speed, not firing at specific shutter speeds, like I talked about in this video here. And essentially it turns out that the mechanical shutter has now permanently broken. This could be something that I can get fixed, but clearly this is an example of not the best build quality, and maybe the GM1 just not being a very robust camera. It had suffered no major impacts or anything like that. It had been in a bag or in a drawer and somehow broken. So now I only have electronic shutter on that camera, which I guess isn't that dissimilar to the new Lumix S9 from a couple of years ago. Maybe the GM1 was just ahead of the curve in that department. And yeah, I'm doing a comparison video between these two cameras, I think next week, so subscribe if you don't want to miss that one. For the longest time, I think one of the main selling points I've heard from long-term Micro Four Thirds shooters has been the high quality weather sealing in some of their flagship cameras. Weather sealing has always been right up there with these cameras as smaller adventure take anywhere cameras. But I do think we can kind of romanticize how much we need weather sealing as like everyday shooters. If I was going on, you know, some crazy expedition where I'm going to be in freezing cold weather, lots of dust, lots of rain all the time, then yeah, I would choose a weather sealed camera, like a properly weather sealed camera. But for the most part, if I'm going out even in Manchester, where I've lived for 6 years, I don't think even when it's chucking it down with rain, I really worry whether or not I'm using a weather sealed camera. There's a lot of common sense that comes into it. If you're in a city that happens to just be raining, you should be careful with your kit. But at the same time, I don't think you're going to break a camera going out in some light rain for 30 minutes. I know, and I've read, that many people do not use EVFs quite the same as other people. But to me, an EVF is a necessity because when you do need one, you really wish you had one. It doesn't matter how bright an LCD is, it can't compete with the harsh midday sun. And if you are actually trying to frame things like in detail, or trying to notice if something is sharp or notice details in the background of a frame, it's really difficult when you've got a screen that just can't compete in the midday sun. But an EVF doesn't have that problem. Compact size, I think, in this conversation should be a given, but I'd be surprised, you know, these days, what is deemed compact and what is not, especially when too many features are trying to be crammed into a everyday package. We saw what happened with the S9. The X100 series from Fuji has gotten progressively bigger as they're fitting in more features, more power, IBIS, things like that. But honestly, I think Micro Four Thirds, especially with the size of the lenses, really benefits from having the smallest body possible. And if that means we don't get IBIS in something like the size of a GM1, for a smaller size camera, I think a lot of us would make that trade-off. But we also know IBIS can be fit in cameras the size of a GX80 and still get a very compact size of a camera. So I think compact size is an easy must-have if we are talking about an everyday camera like this, as long as we get more lenses that also complement that compact size. We don't want loads of super zooms from OM-System going onto a tiny new pen camera. It just looks a little bit weird. Moving inside the camera for a second, we're gonna look at the sensor. Now, I'm not talking about resolution here. Higher resolution is obviously nice, but honestly, for me, I would accept a 16 megapixel 4/3 sensor. The 20 megapixels over the 16 megapixels that you get on like the Pen F versus the GX80, to me is like a negligible difference. There's definitely a lot of conversation at the moment about whether or not a camera should have a stacked sensor. Stacked sensors do come with benefits to like reduced noise, increased image quality and like dynamic range. For me, stacked sensors have always seemed like a really good benefit for silent shooting. So whether it's silent shooting for photography, because the actual readout speed of the sensor is faster and you will get less rolling shutter that happens with slower non-stacked sensors. Stacked sensors are also really good for video because they will help you have less rolling shutter in video, which is kind of just like a norm at this point. Every camera has some level of rolling shutter. A stacked sensor will reduce that. Like the OM3 probably could have been a bit cheaper if it didn't have that newer 20 megapixel stacked sensor. I think these days, if we got a whatever resolution sensor it was, and just a nice, small, mechanical shutter for photography that is quiet enough, like what the GM1s did sound like before mine broke, and also what the GX80 shutter sounds like. Something small, discreet, but works. Honestly, that's kind of the benefit of Micro Four Thirds to me, and why I really enjoy shooting with more of these cameras. There are some 4/3 shutters that do sound quite loud, like the GX1 for example, or the Pen F is pretty loud. So if you can't have a stacked sensor to speed up the readout speed in silent shooting, we just want a nice, quiet mechanical shutter. We're not going to get something as quiet as a leaf shutter, but we just want something reliable, not going to break like the GM1, that gets the job done. To me, I'd choose that over a stacked sensor most of the time. Leave the stacked sensors like the flagships and the high-end models.
This is brilliant, but I like this.
The reason I sold my Lumix GH5 back in 2018 to get the Canon 6D Mark II at the time was just because I needed something with good autofocus. It wasn't even the full frame factor. I was very happy with the GH5 and the footage I could get from it. But as I was starting to do YouTube a little bit on the side of freelancing, I needed a camera that would focus without me holding the lens. So I really wanted something that had good autofocus, and at the time, Canon's DSLRs had their dual pixel autofocus. GH5 had some idea of autofocus, like a concept of autofocus.
We have concepts of a plan that would be better.
Still just concepts? Do you have a fully developed plan?
Let me explain.
And today, pretty much every single camera from Lumix and OM-System has phase detect autofocus. The new releases anyway. So we'd have to assume we're going to see phase detect even in something as small as something like an OM-System pen camera.
Sell me this pen.
Both Lumix and OM-System now actually have a history of having these in-camera color controls that actually kind of feel like they should be in every camera going forward. Lumix now have the Lumix Lab app and the real-time LUT in all of their new full-frame cameras and the latest Micro Four Thirds cameras. So this feels like they should be in any new camera from them, whether it's full-frame or a smaller sensor, hopefully someday. On OM-System side, it has kind of only been 3 cameras so far that have had the creative dial. And I do kind of worry that the fact that it is actually hardware in having the physical dial eats into cost. And that can mean that any camera that has the creative dial is going to have a premium just because it has it. But really, it doesn't need to be a hardware feature. As nice as it is to have a fun dial on the front, like it's nice to use and it's also makes the camera a little bit prettier, I don't think it's really a necessity. It can just be something that's in the software in the menu. Fujifilm never had a physical control for their film simulations until very recently on cameras like the XE5, and honestly it feels a little bit gimmicky. On the pen cameras and the OM cameras, I do kind of like the creative dial more than what Fujifilm have done recently, but at the same time, the hardware aspect of film simulations is not important. It doesn't change how you change the actual settings, it's just how you start getting into the settings. For me, having the in-camera color controls is kind of like a no-brainer, and I don't think it needs to have this extra hardware to kind of drive up the price of the specific bodies if it's just kind of for aesthetic purposes. I'd rather have the customization in camera that we can actually use and play with, even if it means we don't have a dial on the outside. And I actually really enjoyed doing a fun little comparison between 3 different like film-like looks in a video I did like 2 weeks ago, in case you missed it. This was over in Venice, and I think I'm going to be doing another similar video to this very soon, so go take a look.